The ring felt heavy on my finger, a beautiful, shining lie. We'd been together for 5 years, and when Mark proposed, I thought my life was finally going to fall into place. But then came the conversation. The one where he casually suggested we explore our options before tying the knot, because apparently, a lifetime commitment meant a final fling. I smiled. I nodded, and inside, a cold, calculated fury began to build. This isn't just about a broken engagement. This is about a woman pushed to her absolute limit, who decided to play the game better than anyone, and make sure that when the dust settled, she was the only one left standing. Get ready for a story of quiet revenge and unexpected self-discovery. Hey there, I'm Chloe. It's crazy how things change. You know, Liam and I, we were solid, 2 years in, and it felt like we'd been together forever, but in a good way. We've had that easy rhythm, that unspoken understanding. We moved in together about 6 months ago, and honestly, it just felt like the natural next step. Everything was just clicking. He was sweet, thoughtful, always planning little dates, making me laugh. We had this crazy chemistry, too, the kind where you just can't keep your hands off each other. It was passionate, exciting, but also really comfortable, if that makes sense. Like he got me and I got him. We were a team, always, or so I thought. Then, Sarah started at work. She's a super sharp, no-nonsense kind of woman, really bright. We started having lunch together, just talking about anything and everything. She's a big advocate for personal empowerment, really passionate about self-worth and boundaries. And she started opening my eyes to a lot of things I hadn't really thought about before. We'd talk for hours about relationships, consent, all that stuff. And the more she talked, the more I started seeing things differently. She kept saying things like, your body, your choice, always, and you don't owe anyone anything, especially not your intimacy. It made so much sense, you know? Like, why should I ever feel pressured to do something I don't want to do? Shouldn't my partner respect my boundaries, no matter what? So, I started thinking about it, really thinking, and I realized, yeah, sometimes I go along with things, even when I wasn't totally feeling it, just to please Liam, or because it felt like the right thing to do in a relationship. But Sarah's words really hit home. This was my body, my decision. I started seeing it as empowerment, as taking control, as truly practicing consent, not just saying yes when I wanted to, but also feeling totally comfortable saying no when I didn't. It felt revolutionary, honestly, like I was finally asserting myself, finally putting my needs first. The first few times I said no when Liam initiated something, it felt weird. A little awkward, sure, but mostly it felt powerful, like, yep, I'm setting a boundary. This is healthy. This is what modern relationships look like. He'd look a little confused, maybe a little disappointed, but he'd always stop, and I'd just think, good, he gets it. He respects me. I mean, why wouldn't he? It's my body. If I'm not in the mood, I'm not in the mood. It's really that simple, right? It wasn't about him. It was about me and my autonomy, my body, my choice. End of story. I remember thinking, this is what a truly respectful relationship looks like, where one person can say, not tonight, and the other person just accepts it. No questions asked, no pouting, no making you feel guilty. That's real love, real understanding. It's about honoring each other's individual needs and boundaries. I figured he'd be totally on board, that he'd see how progressive and healthy this was. I mean, wouldn't any good partner want their girlfriend to feel completely in control of her own body, to feel empowered? I thought this was just a natural progression of our relationship, a sign that we were growing, evolving. I was so confident in it, so sure I was doing the right thing for both of us. How could he not see that?
Hey, this is Liam. I'm not gonna lie. When Chloe started saying no all the time, it felt like a punch to the gut. Not because I'm some kind of sex addict or anything, but because intimacy, for us, it was always a big part of how we connected, how we showed affection, how we unwound after a long day. It wasn't just about the act itself, you know, it was the closeness, the feeling of being wanted, desired, and suddenly it was just gone. The first few times I tried to be cool about it, I really did. She'd say, not tonight, babe, I'm just not in the mood. And I'd be like, no problem, honey, totally understand. And I told myself, okay, she's tired, she had a tough day, whatever. But then it kept happening. It wasn't just a not tonight, here and there. It became a not tonight most nights, or, ugh, I'm not really feeling it right now whenever I tried to initiate. And each time it felt like a little piece of me was getting chipped away. It started to feel less like she wasn't in the mood, and more like she just wasn't interested in me. Like, was I doing something wrong? Did I suddenly become unattractive? Was there someone else? My mind just raced, trying to figure out what had changed. I tried to ask subtly at first, is everything okay, Chloe? Or, you seem a little distant lately, and she'd just brush it off. Everything's fine, Liam, just busy, you know. But it didn't feel fine. It felt like a wall was going up between us, brick by brick. The rejections really piled up, and it started to mess with my head. I'd get home, and instead of looking forward to seeing her, to cuddling on the couch, to just being close, I'd dread it. I'd dread that moment when I might reach for her hand, or try to pull her close, and she'd pull away. It was exhausting, honestly, emotionally exhausting. It's one thing to be rejected once in a while. It's another to feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the next no. It stops feeling like a boundary and starts feeling like a dismissal. And yeah, I got frustrated. Beyond frustrated, actually. I got resentful. Here I was, trying to be the supportive boyfriend, trying to understand, trying to respect her space. But what about my needs? What about my feelings of rejection? It felt like a completely one-sided street. She was asserting her right to say no. Which fine, I get that in theory. But what about my right to feel loved and desired in the way we always had? What about the partnership part of this relationship? So, eventually, I just stopped trying. What was the point? Why put myself out there to be rejected again and again? Why plan a romantic dinner, light candles, put on music when the most fundamental part of our physical connection was off the table? It felt like I was putting in all this effort for a relationship that wasn't giving anything back to me on that front. And for me, that's a huge part of what makes a relationship. You know, a relationship. It's not just about coexistence. It's about mutual effort, mutual desire, mutual giving. I started pulling back, not consciously at first. It was more like an instinct, a self-preservation thing. If she wasn't interested in that kind of closeness, then why should I keep initiating? Why should I keep planning those elaborate dates if the romantic spark felt like it was dying? Why buy flowers if they just sat there, a reminder of what felt missing? It wasn't me trying to be petty or get back at her. It was me protecting my own heart, my own dwindling enthusiasm. I just couldn't keep pouring myself into something that felt like a bottomless pit of unreciprocated effort. I guess you could say I started to emotionally distance myself. It's not like I stopped loving her, but that feeling of being deeply connected, of being truly partners, it started to fade. When you feel constantly rejected in one area, it starts to bleed into other areas too. You start questioning everything. Is she even happy with me? Does she even want to be with me anymore? My view is that a relationship is a two-way street. It takes effort from both sides. If one person is constantly saying no to something important, then how can the other person be expected to keep giving their all in every other aspect? It just doesn't work like that. It can't.
I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't. Liam was acting like a completely different person. It had been weeks, maybe even more than a month, since he'd planned anything special. No more surprise dinners. No more suggesting weekend getaways. No more of those thoughtful little gestures he used to do, like bringing me coffee in bed or leaving a sweet note on my desk. Nothing. The flowers stopped. The date nights dwindled to almost nothing. And when we did go out, it felt like I was the one doing all the suggesting, all the planning. It was just flat. And honestly, it was driving me nuts. What happened to the guy who used to court me? The one who was so eager and enthusiastic about us? It felt like he'd just given up, like he wasn't even trying anymore. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. How could he just switch off like that? Did he think I wouldn't notice? Did he think it wouldn't bother me? So one night, I just had to say something. We were sitting on the couch, watching some mindless TV show, and the silence, that heavy, empty silence, was just screaming at me. I felt the frustration bubbling up inside, trying to keep my voice steady as I started to lay it all out for him. I knew I sounded a little sharper than I intended, but I couldn't hold it back. He just seemed different, completely changed. He just looked at me, a little surprised, and then seemed to shrug off my concerns. I felt like he was dismissing me, and that only made me angrier. My frustration was rising fast. It felt a lot more like he was just existing next to me, not actively participating in our relationship. I kept thinking, where's the effort? Where's the romance? It truly felt like he was punishing me or something. I mean, what else could it be? He was deliberately withdrawing his affection because I wasn't giving him what he wanted. It felt so unfair, so childish. I had been clear. I had set my boundaries. I had explained that my body, my choice, was about my autonomy, about healthy consent. Shouldn't he just respect that? Shouldn't he understand that my choices about my own body have nothing to do with how much I love him or how much I want him to be romantic and attentive? I expected him to be mature about it, to support me unconditionally in this part. That's what a good partner does, right? They stand by you. They understand your needs, especially when you're asserting something as fundamental as bodily autonomy. I just couldn't wrap my head around why he'd stopped trying. My choices about intimacy were my choices. They shouldn't affect his efforts in the rest of the relationship. He should still be doing all those things, making me feel special, taking me out. That's what a relationship is. You can't just stop being romantic because I'm not always in the mood for sex. I genuinely felt like I was making a perfectly reasonable demand, explaining it all so clearly. My needs hadn't changed. I still wanted the romance, the courtship, the feeling of being cherished. His job was to provide that, regardless of my personal boundaries around physical intimacy. I needed him to go back to how he was. I needed him to put the effort back in, to plan things, to be romantic again. This wasn't fair to me. I really didn't think I was asking for much, just for him to actually try. I fully expected him to apologize, to maybe look a little ashamed, and then promise to do better. I really did. I thought he'd just agree, because what I was asking for was completely reasonable, completely separate from my boundaries around intimacy. I thought he'd see that I was right, that his withdrawal was petty and uncalled for. But he didn't. He just sat there, looking at me, his face completely unmoving. And then he started to explain himself, and what he said next totally blindsided me.
I was ready for an argument, for him to admit he was wrong, but not for this, not for him to actually resist me. She was laying it all out, right there on the couch, telling me I wasn't trying, that I checked out, that I was being petty. And as I listened to her, my mind was just racing, connecting the dots, seeing the whole picture finally snap into place. It wasn't about me being petty, not really. It was about something much bigger, something she just wasn't seeing. I looked at her and it hit me, like truly hit me. She was talking about my efforts, my romantic gestures, my enthusiasm. She wanted me to keep giving, keep planning, keep making her feel special, and she expected it no matter what. But what was she giving in return, really? At least in the ways that mattered to me in a relationship like ours had been. So I just started to speak, slowly at first, but with this growing clarity. I tried to explain that just like she had her moods, her feelings about her body and what she was up for, I had my own moods too, my own feelings about romance, about putting myself out there, about planning those special dinners or surprises, my desire to do those things, my enthusiasm for them. It wasn't some endless wellspring. It was fed by how I felt in a relationship, by how wanted and desired I felt. I mean, she'd spend weeks saying no to physical intimacy. Every time that little sting, that feeling of being unwanted, it chipped away at me, and she was right. It was her body, her choice. I had tried to respect that, to understand it. But if she had the right to say no to me, to a fundamental way we'd always connected, then didn't I have a similar right? Didn't I have the right to feel a certain way? To have my enthusiasm for grand gestures wane when I felt constantly rebuffed in a different but equally important part of our bond? It wasn't about control or punishment. It was about balance, about basic human give and take. If her decision to say no meant she wasn't in the mood for physical intimacy, then my feelings, my disappointment, my growing sense of rejection meant I wasn't in the mood for elaborate romantic planning. Why should my mood for showering her with dates and surprises be any less valid than her mood for intimacy? Both were expressions of desire, of connection, and if one half of that equation was consistently absent, the other half would naturally suffer. I told her clearly that I respected her choices, absolutely. Her body, her choice, that was her right, and I wouldn't argue with it. But that same principle, that same respect for individual choice, had to apply to me too. If she could choose how she wanted to engage physically, then I could choose how I wanted to engage romantically based on how I felt in the relationship. It wasn't about tit for tat, like keeping score. It was about the emotional energy, the willingness to invest. That energy just wasn't there anymore, not at the same level. Because I felt consistently emotionally disconnected and rejected in a way that mattered deeply to me. I laid it out for her. If she found my approach unreasonable, if she thought my feelings were somehow less valid than hers, then maybe we weren't on the same page about what a relationship actually was. Maybe we needed to reevaluate everything. I wasn't trying to be mean, but I had to be honest. I told her, straight up, that if she couldn't understand that, if she couldn't see my side of this, then she was free to leave. That might sound harsh, but I felt like I had to draw a line. I couldn't keep pouring into an empty well. For me, love, real love, was about mutual giving. It was about both people actively investing, making each other feel wanted and valued in the ways that mattered to them. It wasn't about one person constantly giving while the other withheld. It wasn't about one person dictating the terms of affection while expecting the other to just keep performing. That just wasn't how a partnership worked. Not for me. Anyway, I couldn't go back to how things were. Not if nothing else changed. I wasn't going to pretend I was overflowing with romantic gestures when I felt emotionally starved. It just wasn't sustainable. It was her turn to really think about what my body, my choice meant. Not just for her, but for both of us in this relationship. Did it apply equally to both partners, to both our feelings, both our emotional states, both our capacities to give? That was the real challenge I was putting in front of her.
Liam's words hit me like a physical blow, not because he yelled or even raised his voice, but because of the cold, hard logic in what he was saying. My mood about intimacy, his mood about romance. It was like a mirror had been held up and I didn't like what I saw reflected back. For days, that conversation just replayed in my head over and over. I tried to argue with it, internally of course. My body, my choice, that's a fundamental right. His mood about planning a date isn't the same as my autonomy over my own. BAFTA. I went through all the arguments Sarah and I had discussed, but every time I circled back, Liam's quiet words echoed. If she could choose how she wanted to engage physically, then I could choose how I wanted to engage romantically based on how I felt in the relationship. It started to sink in, slowly at first, then with this awful, undeniable clarity. I had been so focused on my right to say no, that I hadn't even considered the impact of those constant no's on him, on his feelings, on his sense of being desired, on his motivation to put effort into the relationship. I expected him to be this endless well of romantic gestures, constantly pouring out love and attention, even while I was, in his eyes, shutting down a significant part of our connection. That's when the double standard smacked me right in the face. I expected him to give, unconditionally, regardless of my choices. But I wasn't giving in return in a way that he clearly valued and needed. I expected him to understand my not in the mood, but I wasn't extending the same understanding to his emotional state. His dwindling mood for grand gestures because he felt rejected. How could I demand unconditional support for my choices while only offering conditional intimacy? It was so incredibly lopsided. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Sarah's advice, while powerful in theory, had inadvertently led me down a path of imbalance. It was all my needs, my boundaries, my autonomy. And while those things are important, they can't exist in a vacuum, in a partnership. A relationship isn't just two people asserting their individual rights. It's about two people choosing to come together, to give and take, to understand each other's needs, and to find a way to meet them mutually. True empowerment, I was starting to see, wasn't just about what I could say no to, but also about what I was willing to contribute and how I fostered a healthy, reciprocal connection. The weight of it, the unfairness of my stance, just crushed me. All the defensiveness I had felt melted away, replaced by this overwhelming feeling of guilt and regret. I had been so caught up in being right, in asserting my modern womanhood, that I had completely overlooked how much I was hurting the person I loved, the person who had been so supportive of me. I saw it now, clear as day. I had been asking for a one-way street, expecting him to keep filling my tank while I left his empty. I knew I had to talk to him. I approached him, heart pounding, and just said it. All of it. I told him I was sorry. Truly sorry. I explained that I finally understood how unfair I had been, how I had overlooked his feelings and his needs while focusing only on my own. I admitted that I had expected him to keep trying regardless of how he felt, and that was wrong. I told him I saw the double standard, and that I finally understood what he meant about reciprocity, that his feelings, his moods, his desire to give romance were just as valid as my feelings about intimacy. I didn't want our relationship to be like this. I wanted what we had before, that balance, that easy connection. I wanted us to be partners again, truly. It was a huge, humbling realization, but it was also a relief, like a heavy burden had been lifted because now, maybe we could actually fix things. I knew it wouldn't be instant, that trust takes time to rebuild, but I felt a new understanding settled in me, a deeper sense of what mutual respect and genuine partnership actually meant. It meant considering both of us, both our choices, both our needs, every step of the way, and I was ready to try, ready to really try together.